I am HSDickson, representing Bayelsa West. Mr. President and my dear colleagues, I first of all would like to appreciate all the steps that the National Assembly and this Senate in particular taken in the recent past concerning the anomalous situation in the governance structure and the operations of the NDDC. And I do so because, as Mr. President and colleagues know very well, apart from any other thing, the NDDC Act was an act that the National Assembly, at the time the executive bill was brought, made a lot of input. As a matter of fact, I want to use this opportunity. I know that older legislators from the region who have been here would have done so over and over. But it's good to also register our appreciation for the commitment and patriotism displayed by the leadership of both chambers of the National Assembly at the time when they overrode the president on the context, on the funding dynamics and structure of the bill. As a result of that courage, and Mr. President, you know you were part of that National Assembly that did that for this country and for the region, the Niger Delta region. Political careers were sacrificed. So the National Assembly, more than any other bill, more than any other institution, has a duty to jealously guide and guard the independence and the effectiveness and operations of the NDDC as you have done. I say so because when I was governor of Bayelsa and chairman of the South-South Governors Forum, we met with the president and supported the need for a forensic audit of the operations of the NDDC. And now we have a situation where, instead of swiftly composing of the board as stipulated by the Act, what was put in place was an illegal structure known as the Interim Management Committee. And that is why I'm thanking Mr. President and, by extension, the National Assembly for doing what was right, for protecting that critical institution. Unfortunately, Mr. President, whereas it is true that an audit can go pari passu with a board, as a matter of fact, if you want to carry out a proper audit, forensic or otherwise, you set up the board according to the Act for them to do what they need to do. That's what is happening in every other corporation or institution. But in the case of the NDDC, things are left the way they are. As it is now, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, all the governance structures and mechanisms put in place by the Act are non-existent. You don't have the governing board made up of the governors and officials at the federal level. You don't have the board sitting on it. And now, in place of the INC, yes, the IMC has gone, but in its place, what do we have? You have another illegality replacing the earlier illegality, for which the Senate and the National Assembly courageously and patriotically took the positions that you have taken. So while we are now presented with this situation, where now today the Senate is considering a budget to be implemented not by the IMC, which at least had 3 people. This budget we are now considering, if passed, is to be implemented by another unknown entity called a sole administrator. So instead of an IMC that has at least 3 people or more, you now have an illegal entity known as a sole administrator to manage this budget. So I want to thank Mr. President of the Senate and distinguished senators and the National Assembly as an institution for taking the principled and patriotic positions that you have had to take this year. We're all aware, even when we're watching from outside, We saw the steps and what you had to go through, the blackmail and everything. But I want to say that you did what was right, and we shouldn't run away from that. Having said that, we are now at a stage where we have to pass a bill, at least for the sake of the people. We have to pass a bill for the sake of the people. But I want to make some suggestions. Number one, there is no indication, Mr. President, as to the duration within which this sole administrator, unknown to the NDDC law, will act. Number two, and arising from number one, there is no indication as to how soon Mr. President will exercise his powers under the NDDC Act in making the recommendations. He has the power to appoint. There's no indication. And there's no indication also whether this budget that we are now being told to pass is the one that will be implemented by this sole administrator, unknown to the laws of this country, unknown to the NDDC Act itself specifically, and unknown to the Senate. And here we are made to consider this bill. When the Constitution says screen so people, or an act of the National Assembly says...
Distinguished, I think you need to round up so that we can make progress, yes.
But whereas we need now at this stage, in the interest of the people of the Niger Delta, to consider and pass this budget, we need to add a caveat while doing so, that this budget, when passed, should not be implemented beyond the recurrent normal running expenses until the NDDC Act is complied with. So that you don't have a situation where we pass this budget and then one sole administrator, unknown to the laws, unknown to even the Senate, someone whose capacity you cannot assess because you have not screened him. It's not known. You can't hold him responsible now because it's not a creation of the laws of the country. But we must pass the budget. So I support that, Mr. President. But in doing so, let us add some caveats. Because the Senate has done well by delaying, at least the budget is there. The monies that may have gone the wrong way are still there. So let us pass it. But in doing so, it is my suggestion that we should add a caveat that the capital components of this budget we are now considering should not be implemented by this sole administrator. It should be done by the board properly constituted according to law. I so move.